2.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Tactical Games Performance Podcast. I'm here with Nick Palacios. We're going to talk through a little bit of a different format for the podcast going forward. We're going to continue to do our AARs and talk about the sport and talk about things happening in the sport. But this particular, I don't know, what do we want to call it?
This new segment, I guess.
Yeah.
You know, it's a new podcast or new podcast room, new gym, new facility, all that good stuff.
So we're adding a little bit of something different into here. So what we're going to be highlighting in this particular performance podcast and all the performance podcasts going forward are how our individual competitors are performing at the specific events. So we're going to deep dive into shooting percentages. We're going to deep dive into times, finish times, how stages progressed, how they worked, and provide you guys a little bit greater detail in, you know, our expectations versus how people performed, how we tested things that might have changed and switched. And I think it's going to give a lot of people insight into how different divisions perform when it comes to this podcast. As always, the Tactical Games is designed for everybody. You know, we have our elite division, our tactical divisions, our age groups, our intermediate division. There's a lot of different room in there and a lot of different requirements when it comes to competing in that. This podcast is going to highlight the top end of the sport, right? Yeah. The people that train consistently, that are out there trying to win and trying to be the best. We love everybody that competes in this sport, but our goal in this podcast specifically is to cover the people that are training to become the national champion.
Yeah.
Right. So that's what we're going to cover here. For this particular one, why don't you dive into what we're going to get after for what event?
Yeah. So this is going to go over the Dalton, New Hampshire team event that we just did. This was our second team event of the year. So different format than our standard regional events. These tend to be a little bit more of an air of fun around it, instead of like being so competitive with individual events. But, you know, in talking about like qualifying divisions and things like that, it'll work well for even somebody who's in a non-qualifying division to hear this information, to kind of see how well other people are performing. So that way they know what they can take into their training and where they need to, you know, where they stack up with a division that they may be wanting to bump up to. But today's going to go over the New Hampshire division, which is one of our favorite locations that we get to go to every year. Beautiful part of the country. So it'll be fun to go over that one.
Yeah, everything is great about New Hampshire except for the drive.
The drive is rough for sure. Three full days of driving.
It's terrible, right? Driving back was, and we had the advantage this time where we drove from Iowa to New Hampshire, so we saved a day of travel there.
Yeah,
but that drive back was rough, man.
It's brutal. After a full week of setup, running the event, you're already ragged come Friday morning. So then the drive on top of that for 12 hours straight days, whatever you want to call it. I think one day we did like 15 hours, 16 hours. It's a tough one for sure. So I'm always glad when that one's in the rear view.
For sure. All right. So let's dive into this. So I think one of the unique things about this this event in particular was how many co-ed teams we saw in it, right? Typically the first event of the year is more male-male or female-female teams. This event, we had a ton of co-ed teams.
Yeah. And the cool thing with that is you're getting like co-ed team members from like the top tier in the division. So it's cool to see how athletes that you see regularly throughout the year that compete individually work together or don't work well together as a team, because when you're doing these team formats, it's all about communication. And you see the teams that do well, especially when you're seeing something like an action stage where they're doing a carbine shoot where one person's shooting, the other person's shooting, they're kind of pitter-pattering back and forth. When they're not communicating, you see that reflect in their finish time versus the teams that speak well and communicate. So that's, to me, like that's always one of the most interesting things to hear and see when we do these events.
Yeah, that was one thing that I think that the programming was a little bit deficient on, was communication back and forth. There was a lot of solo, like you did your work, your partner did their work, and then you met in the middle. I think we can always do more to require more communication between partners, right? You know, it's awesome if you get to train with your partner all the time, but if you don't get to train with your partner all the time, that can create a huge wrinkle. It's really funny when you see the husband-wife.
Those are my favorite.
They're absolutely my favorite.
Those are definitely my favorite, especially West Virginia last year. I think we saw it more in that event than we have in the ones after that this season. That one was hilarious because there was actually a lot of couples that competed in West Virginia. Yeah. Not so much this event. We had a couple, but the couple pairings are always interesting feedback. I would love to mic them up.
Well, we'll look at the leaderboard here first. So we're looking at overall leaderboard here, and Team SIG showed out incredibly strong in this event, right?
Second event that they've come through and have done exceptionally well at, Pennsylvania being the first one. And they did great last weekend.
They had
the other weekend.
8 people competing from Sig Sauer Academy, which is pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Austin Green and his partner finished first in the event. They were a tactical team. It was a male team, but they shot incredibly well. I think in their division, they won by like 10%.
Yeah, it was pretty significant.
So what does that mean?
It means that there's some problem in the tactical division for other people, for sure. Sig's coming in tough. Like I said, I think we had at least 6 people from Sig in Pennsylvania, and I think 4 out of 6 of them podiumed, and the majority of them podiumed this go around as well too. So they're coming in hot for sure.
Well, so Austin specifically is a hell of a competitor. I'm excited to see, and I think his goal is to win the tactical division at nationals this year, and then progress up to elite next year. So we'll see how he performs as an individual up there.
He's definitely a good shooter, and he's strong enough to do it as well too. The only thing working against him is just experience in competing. Yeah. So
absolutely. So now we're looking at the elite division standing. So another thing that let's talk about how many co-ed teams that we had there. So I know Sal and Lupe, first place team, was a co-ed team. Megan and Jared, that was a co-ed team. E and Zach, that was a co-ed team. George did not have a co-ed team. Jacob Horton did not have a co-ed team. Ben was a co-ed team. And I think the rest of the teams on there were not co-ed.
Yeah. It's almost 50%, pretty close, 40-50% were co-ed teams. And out of those, the top 3 teams that podium were all co-ed.
And it's interesting because I've heard before gripes from co-ed teams saying it wasn't fair for them to compete against male teams because they felt like they were getting the short end of the stick.
Yeah.
In actuality, like if your female can shoot on the team, you're going to be incredibly competitive.
That's the biggest equalizer. I mean, you saw, I mean, going through arbitration, when Sal and Lupe would come in and I was looking at their targets, there was times where Lupe was shooting almost better than Sal.
Yeah.
And sometimes she did outshoot Sal in rifle or pistol. So if your female partner can shoot, I mean, that's a huge win for you.
So going back to like legacy CrossFit games, it was always the females on the team that determined the placement for team competitors. If you had 2 strong females, you were going to do well. So in this case, if you have a co-ed team and you have a strong female on your team, there's a good chance that you're going to crush it. So let's look at, we'll dissect sales scores first since he's in first place here.
Before you do that though, if you look at the top 4 people that qualified in that division, you're less than 5% difference between first place and fourth place.
And that separation really kicked up during the last stage too, because that was much tighter. I think it was within like 2%.
It was a few. It wasn't much.
Yeah. So that's cool. That means that there was a good battle there. So if we're looking at penalties here, Ruck Around and Find Out, it looks like was their biggest penalties. They had 150 seconds worth of penalties for burpees not completed, 60 seconds worth of penalties for conics carry not completed. But other than that, when we're looking at misses for their scored stages that weren't point stages, they had 10 misses as a team.
That's pretty impressive. When you look at the breakdown for the stage on that, the loadout was 3x12 for rifle, so 36 for rifle, and then 3x12. So it was 36 and 36 for both athletes.
Yeah.
So to only drop 10 shots is impressive.
That's very impressive. So now we look at like finish times, right? If we're looking at times in these stages, there are times where good, but not impressive, right? I mean, they time cap on this stage in particular.
Yeah. I think most people did on that stage in particular, just because of the overall flow of it. It was a tough stage for sure. And the way we made them carry the bags as well too, that played a factor into it.
Height definitely was a factor of that. And you saw that if you had a big mismatch on your male-female team or on your team's height, like one person was bearing the weight on that partner carry, which is the same as when we've done litter carries before. Yeah. But I thought that the bags created a unique challenge, and the stairs in those conics boxes are terrible.
Yeah, they're pretty steep as far as the stairs go, and the bags themselves, there's not a ton of slack in them, but if you've got somebody who's teetering higher and the other person's shorter, a lot of that weight's going to fall on the shorter person. So
yeah, I'm chuckling right now because George is Corgi is trying to make an entrance into the podcast studio, and he's getting pretty close here, so we might have a guest appearance without unintentional guest appearance. So we're looking at mostly first place finishes and 8th place finish in what's stage 5? Is that the run?
That was the run. Yeah. The black mailbox. Yeah. So
the black mailbox number 49.
pretty as simple as you can get it for a turnaround point. So for those of you that weren't there, the run was a very straightforward in and out. I think there was 2 turns total in the run, going one way and 2 coming back. And we named it Black Mailbox 49 because that was a turnaround point. So
and that run, like Jared came up to me and told me, I think he averaged a 450 on the run out. But that, like the group paced together, and they were all like around 450 to 550 going downhill. And then it is as fast as you can get back up.
Correct. Yeah. That, I mean, you're making all your time on the descent. And then I didn't run it, but when we took the bikes down and back up, I think it was like 460 foot of elevation gain and loss. Inside of a 2-mile run. And really that's just a mile, because you're really just getting all that on the way back.
You're running straight down for a mile and then straight up 500 feet. So every time we've done a run, which has been twice there now, I know they did a run previously, but that run, like, I think the run that they did previously there was like 6.5 miles.
It was, from what I heard, it was long. They went into O'Neill, which is the racing school, right,
and they
next
lost.
to it.
It was just like, it was a bad deal.
It's easy to get lost there for sure. Once you start getting in there.
And when you get into that kind of distance, like, there's a lot of opportunity for people to get lost.
For sure. I was going to be shocked if somebody got lost on this run.
Hey, you run straight down the hill and right back up. Okay. Hawk Tuagun. Let's talk about Hawk.
Shoot on that thing.
Shoot on that thing. That was
a John Hatcher.
We had a good time with John Hatcher on that. So if we're looking at that stage in particular, let's just look at some results from Hawk 2 again. So here we have Sal edging out Megan Jared, like, barely. I mean, we're talking about a second differential. That's a close. I mean, 98.1 off of 100% score. That's pretty awesome. George Luzik, and what was his partner's name?
Jake Neargarth.
Jake, there you go. Thank you. Jake. I knew that. I just couldn't think of it. You're talking about 10% behind him. So almost a 10-second differential. I think a lot of people don't realize how important the action stages are in our matches and how big of a point swing they can be. And people complain about that. To me, it's no different than a 300-pound bag. Correct. Like, a physical impediment shouldn't be treated any differently than a shooting impediment from a lack of performance there. But then if we continue to take this down, I mean, you're seeing the scores, and that can be reflected in the point spread here, spread out pretty dramatically after we get to third place, right? So we have a 20-point spread between first and fourth. So I'm just curious to see how that compares to, like, Ruck Around and Find Out. So we were looking at a 20-point differential here. Here we had Jacob Horton won this stage. It looks like he had 3 misses, which is awesome. No penalties, so it looks like he did actually get a time, so he did complete it. George Luzik and his teammate competed it as well. And we're looking at a point spread here of a 10% point spread between first and fourth. And now if you look at these stages, the men perform better physically on these stages, the male teams, this stage in particular. For sure. Just something to look at and kind of that's interesting. Sal and Lupe had 150 seconds worth of burpee penalties and a minute worth of carry not completed penalties. So you're looking at 210 seconds. They still finished in 5th place in this one. And
for clarification, so on the hand release burpees, those are a 15-second penalty. So that means that they didn't get 10 total. They got 10 total work penalties on that stage.
This is an interesting one because I'm looking at something here that, so we'll have to go back and take a look at this again. So there's a 0 here, which is an impossible thing to have. If they didn't finish their last round, there's a 0 here.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so we're finding these issues as we go through, guys. So. Anyways, something that we'll need to look into. We did have a scoring issue at this event that we tried to talk through, and we ended up having to change in one of the divisions. It came to our attention that there was a penalty that was assessed on a stage, and we didn't learn about this till afterwards. So during final arbitration, we had a competitor come in, and they notified us that scores were not as entered on the score sheet in for the females divisions in particular. The female division had Becky Wagner and Jessica Bolton was her partner, assessed with 60 seconds worth of penalties for that stage in particular. That stage on our video that we had on YouTube clearly showed them getting to the final round of shooting.
Yeah.
So there was an issue in scoring reporting. When we made the arbitration, the final arbitration, we assessed them that penalty based on the score sheet that was written in there. And then we pushed final scores, and then we announced the winners. In our rule set, it says after we've announced final scores, there is no further arbitration, no scores will be changed. In this case, what was presented to me was there was zero possibility for arbitration because it was pushed at the last second beforehand. So we did have to make an adjustment to that score.
Yeah.
Now it's obviously not, it's Katie Batiste and her partner's name escapes me at this time, but we had to make that adjustment. It's something that we work hard on, making sure that scores are always correct and updated properly.
Yeah.
This one, there's a miss here. There's definitely something that we see on the screen here that'll need to be corrected. It's too late to correct it now, but something that we need to prepare for in the future, because that definitely would have changed the final standings, especially with how close they were.
Yeah. It's something else to just double check once we push them, go to practice score, and just verify all these misses and things like that.
Yeah,
so
correct.
If we see those zeros, we know that there may be something up there.
Yep, but that's something that we missed for sure. And in this, when we're doing this scoring, what we're trying to do is the best that we can, right? We've got a lot of different people out there competing in a lot of different divisions, and obviously small little things like that can get missed. And that was one where we definitely needed to assess more penalties than what was actually assessed. So apologies to that, and we'll move on and learn from it. So now if we're looking at stage 3 Spaceballs, so this was a ski erg in bag over the bar stage.
Yep.
I thought this was the first time that we had instituted a heavier bag over a higher height bar.
Yeah.
So we've done something similar with the handle bags, but not with the balls.
Yeah.
So it's cool to get that out there. And definitely now what you're seeing here is 3 co-ed teams that are on the top of the podium, or placing first, second, and third here. And the difference here is shooting.
Yep.
If you're looking at 10 misses for first place team, 1 miss for first place team, 6 misses for the second place team, and 8 misses for the third place team. When you get into the fourth place team here, it looks like maybe they had some penalties assessed. Yeah, they've got, okay. So here's what we're seeing here. These are the 10-second misses. So that was the issue. Let's go back to that other stage before we.
I think that's because if they had 0 misses on there, they had a 5th place finish on that. If there was 0, that would have jumped them up to first.
Yeah, let's go ahead and let's scan that over before we. There we go.
Okay. So
there we go.
70 misses. Okay.
Oh, man, I thought we made a big mistake there.
So, and for clarification again on that, what we do when on the back end when we're scoring, we put in all of the penalties based on our programming. So when we put those in, sometimes people happen to miss a lot.
Yeah.
So we batch
especially
those
in team events.
Yeah, correct. So you have double the loadout what you normally would. So instead of having to individually push 1 plus sign for every single miss, if somebody has 70 plus whatever misses, we just batch those in 10s. So that's where you see that miss 10 on there.
Well, I'm glad we had that conversation to figure that out, because that would have been terrible.
That would have been.
Could you imagine the hate we would have got? Somebody's going to stop watching this at like minute 15 and freak the fuck out. So again, so this constitutes 700 seconds worth of penalties. So now we're seeing what was actually 770 misses.
70 misses.
So, and that makes sense now with the round not completed.
Okay.
Woo! Thank God. All right, let's go back to Spaceballs and let's dive into this further. So it looks like Meg and Jared had 31 misses on this stage.
Yep.
And it looks like that's pretty common, actually. So Sal and Lupe only had 8 misses on this stage, but E and Zach had 36 misses. So here's one where you've got a big variance in scoring as far as the how people shot, but physically they were able to perform at a level that was much greater. So if you're looking at total time here, total time where these guys finished, they finished like 300 seconds behind this team here.
Significant difference.
That's where your 30 misses makes up for it.
Because usually, most times, like if you finish fast on a stage, that's not always going to dictate your final placement on that stage, right? Because your misses and other penalties come into factor.
Right.
So this shows you they busted ass on that when they finished very quick and they did not miss very much either.
And and we're looking at 500-second final time versus an 843-second final time. Sal is definitely on the shorter end, so getting that bar up over the top was probably more difficult for him, as it would be for Hepner.
It's probably a jump shot from both.
Jump shot.
Yeah.
Hard in the paint. All right, now we're looking at stage 4 till you drop. Give me a rundown on the stage.
Yeah, so Till You Drop was a point stage where athletes were asked to have a specific amount of prescribed weight in the form of plate weights, and they had to carry those overhead. They were getting points every time they would hit one side of the drop zone and the other side of the drop zone while their partner was shooting on the firing line. You had to continually keep moving back and forth and gaining points with your weight until your partner was done shooting, and then the partner would come over, they'd switch, and then they'd run that through. I think we did that for four rounds total for, I think it was a 12-minute stage.
Yeah, so they'd come in and tag you out, and then you would go back and forth. And when because you designed the stage, when you presented this to me, I was like, well, that's fucking dumb. And then I tried it, and I was like, oh, this is actually a really good stage.
Yeah, it was a sleeper. Everybody slept on that one.
Yeah,
and I made sure I went over there for the first squad to go because I was like, fingers crossed. But we vetted it, and I was like, oh, that actually burnt me out significantly.
That was when I knew that it was going to be a good stage, is when we actually went through and vetted it.
Yeah.
It gave you opportunity to work together and to come up with a cohesive plan that was going to be beneficial for both of you.
Yeah.
And anybody who went out super hot in the beginning got wrecked.
For sure.
Like their shooting went to shit. Everything just didn't go well.
Yeah, and we planned the shooting accordingly where we knew your shoulders were going to get burnt out. So we made you have to stand shooting, at least for pistol, where you saw the issues on pistol. People were missing pretty significantly on that one. The only thing I would change on that, and we were just restricted by the width of the bay, is to make it a longer down and back, because we did have a penalty in there where if you dropped the weight in the middle of a drop zone, you had to leave it. You had to do a run down and back, pick the weight up, then proceed in the same direction that you were initially traveling. We didn't see that happen too often because it wasn't too far. So if we stretch that out next time, I think we'd see more of that penalty getting assessed on there.
So in my opinion, I think the distance, the width was perfect because it was short enough that you could continue going.
Yeah.
So that meant the point spread on the shooting and the overhead carry weren't going to be so far apart that the overhead carry didn't matter.
True.
So you want to make sure that whenever we're designing something like this, like ideally you can keep it as balanced as possible. So the fact that people didn't have to do the sprint, I'm okay with.
Yeah.
If we wanted to institute an overhead carry, that was a requirement for a long distance before somebody went and shot. But when it comes to a point stage, I think this was actually pretty appropriate. So when we're looking at this, the one thing that is different here, if you guys aren't familiar with our scoring, when it is a point stage, you're accumulating points. So your reps, your hits on paper, all of those give you a point. And then everybody's ranked based on how they perform against the top score. So it looks like Sal and Lupe won this one as well. They've got 100 points. We don't have any way of actually determining with the information we have in front of us how many completed points they had.
Yeah, we'd have to have the tablet with us to check it out.
But it looks like E and Zach were right behind them. You're within 5% there, and then Jared and Meg were right behind E and Zach as well. So again, really close in the top four, even with George's team as well. You're getting really close. That spread starts to get larger once you get past the fifth place there.
And one thing that we did start to see too was, so we had a stipulation where you had to go down and back at least once before you could go shoot. And then once you were done with all your shooting iteration, then whatever time you have left, you can continue to gain more points. We were seeing some people getting smart with it and only doing a down and back, saving their shoulders, saving their heart rate, so that way they can go and shoot efficiently. They were knocking the shooting out really fast, or the work and the shooting out, so they had whatever time they had to just accumulate points down and back.
Yeah, so I guess here's the thing, like any idle time is time you're not gaining points.
Yeah.
So if your partner isn't shooting and getting all their rounds off in the time that you're doing the down and back, then you're wasting time.
Yeah.
So you're wasting an opportunity to gain points. So I think that's where as a team, you need to decide, like, all right, you're going to take about 1.5 minutes to shoot effectively, right? To shoot in that 90th percentile, 90%. I then need to figure out what's my rest breakdown going to be, so I'm not fatiguing my shoulders, taking a break at the ends where I'm allowed to. That kind of strategy is very, very important, I think. And when it comes to it being a 7-point spread between first and fourth, like it's a big difference, because you're probably talking about here, we'll say 100 reps versus 90 reps. Yeah. So that extra 10 down and back, so those extra 10 hits makes a huge difference. I mean, that's gonna shake up the leaderboard. All right, looking at mailbox number 49, our run. No doubt that Katie Knight and Ben were going to crush this.
Yeah.
Katie Knight's a freaking monster when it comes to running.
She's a phenom for sure.
That woman can run so damn fast.
Yeah, and for extended amounts of time. Yeah. Like when she gets to a point where she like gets somebody who's an effective instructor and like gets her really plussed up on shooting, she's going to be a problem in that division.
She's physically she's pretty unstoppable.
Yeah.
And we have some very strong female competitors. Yeah. And when I say strong, I mean the totality of strength, like very fit female competitors.
Yeah. Well-rounded.
She's up there with them. And she just can't shoot.
And she's new again. Experience is the hinder there. But yeah, once she figures out how to shoot effectively, she's gonna be a problem.
And Ben's a great dude too. We love having Ben out. So I think she pulled him up the hill.
We talked right before her run, and she was talking about having to make sure that she keeps him in line with the run. And she left, and then like 15 minutes, 16 minutes later, they're already back. And I was like, "You guys already do your run?" She's like, "Yeah, we're done." Like not winded, nothing. I was like, Jesus.
I think it's hard to describe how that the grade.
Yeah, it's defeating because you go all the way down, you turn around, you come back, and you're running for a quarter mile before you hit or maybe about half a mile before you hit the hill, and then you're just like, fuck.
I was walking up it on the way, like in the morning when we got stuck in traffic. I was walking up it, and
yeah.
I can't. And I've run up it. I ran when we vetted it last year. But that hill sucks.
Trying to direct traffic, barely talk.
All right, let's get into more Sopapillas, please.
Yeah.
My personal favorite stage name. Let's talk through more Sopapillas, please. What do you got here?
So More Sopapillas was a kind of a twist on Inman, but with the team aspect of that. So you have an ascending order of bags that you had to work with throughout each of the rounds. So it was a four round stage. You start with your lightest bag. I think we had something around, well, I'll pull it up real quick. I want to say it was about 18 or 19 reps for the first.
It should have been 18. I think it was, oh no, it was 16. Didn't we go to 16?
We did. Oh no, 18 for the first round, which for the elite division was a 125-pound bag. So you split load those reps. Then you go to 14.
Was that for a male team? What was the co-ed weight?
That was for a male team. The co-ed teams were 100, 125, 150, and then they finished with the 200. Yep. And then the male teams finished with the 250.
Got it. Yep.
Yeah.
So looking at this stage now, we click into like Meg and Jared here, right? 582 seconds compared to the time for the winner, which was almost 2 minutes slower. The differential here, which is 1 point, which is absolutely freaking ridiculous, came down to shooting.
Yep.
We're looking at 2 misses versus 14 misses.
Big difference.
Big difference, but one shot here would have put them into the leaderboard position.
Yep.
I mean, that's one hell of a physical performance.
It is. And also just like thinking about just like the time management on the line and just the focus that it takes to make all those hits downrange, because that wasn't your standard pistol rifle target. We had a pistol, a mid-range rifle target shot, and then we had a further rifle shot as well too, where they had to split their magazines appropriately. So you've got mental management there as well too, while you're already under duress. So
Yep. I have found our first mistake for the programming for the weekend. This was supposed to be a 770-second time time for this, and they got 77, which doesn't honestly affect the points for anybody performing underneath them, since it's based off the first place points. But this team, who was in last place for the weekend, ended up getting third place finish in this event. But again, like, that didn't affect any of the other scores, because this score here, for example, is based on this score. Actually, let's say the final score here is based on this score. So this one would have taken them to about a 1700 final time, which would have dropped them significantly. So that was there was one that was missed there. All right, now we're looking at triple booked. This was a 3-part stage. This was I think one of the more brutal stages that we've ever done.
Yeah, it was just grueling, and these ones are always fun to program and like see when we're doing them in an event weekend, but logistically to make sure that they run effectively is always a little bit of like all right, here we go. Because no matter how much preparation we put in this, there's usually something that comes up where we're like, oh man, we didn't think of that, but it actually went relatively smooth the whole weekend.
Yeah,
which
I
was
think there was
awesome.
some confusion about the weights early on.
Yeah.
Just on the second part, where people didn't know or they weren't paying attention during the brief. And
Yeah.
so what we did is we posted the weights, put them on a board.
Yeah.
People were able to see them. They knew when they walked up there what they were supposed to pick up. So this stage was a 3-parter, started with 10 minutes. You basically earned 2 magazines. In the elite division for every 3 rope climbs that were performed.
Correct.
So any partner could shoot any weapon, up to 5 magazines of their own each, but you gain those magazines. So there was a lot of strategy. I actually did like the strategy involved in this one.
Yeah, same.
There was people that went and both partners shot at the same time, which I think is a really dumb idea, because you really, again, always want somebody working and somebody shooting.
Correct.
At
That
any
way
point
you're
in
filling
time.
that pipeline the whole time.
Yeah. You've got somebody that's you're gaining points. You're moving forward. They did get points for the rope climbs and they got points for the hits. After that, they transitioned. They had a 2-minute break period. They transitioned over to the next stage and they had a mess of bags to carry. The weight was heavy, but it was more about the awkwardness of having to carry a ball maybe and then a bag, jerry cans. So they had to go underneath the parallel. Everything had to go under the parallel. Both partners had to go under the parallel. They touched on the other end. They got a point for that. So they did that for, I think it was 9 minutes back and forth. So 9 minutes there. And then they went over to the third part of the stage, which started immediately after the completion of the 9-minute stage. And on that one, what they were doing was that ass on the ground sled pull and then a pinch carry.
Exactly.
Which was cool. So if we're looking at performance here, what I saw when I was watching Sal and Lupe, because I watched them intently for a good majority of this, was their efficiency on the rope climbs. That made a huge difference.
And they'd been practicing rope climbs a lot lately too, and it showed. Like
that's what Sal came up to us and told us. That, and you could see like Sal was ripping out rope climbs, but what was more impressive was Lupe. I don't know if she went 1 for 1 with Sal and how many that he did, but she was damn close.
They had a really good performance on that stage. Again, shot very well, had a good game plan going into it, which I know you said earlier, we didn't put a lot of emphasis on like team communication, but regardless if it's implied in the stage or not, like the teams that get together and they see the breakdown of the stage design and the programming, and then they get together and they say, okay, what's the most efficient way that we can map out this stage without doing any extracurricular movements that'll lose us time? Because especially, as we see here, every little bit counts for your
So I think that's strategy versus communication. And those are two different things. Like you need to communicate in order to develop a strategy. But on a stage, communicating back and forth, which is something that we've done historically with like long range, where it's like call your shot and you need to bounce back and forth on who's shooting what. That's something more that I was thinking about. But no, I think strategy is incredibly important. And a lot of our stages, a majority of the stages had that.
Yeah, absolutely.
E's another one. She's a monster on the rope. We saw her just crushing rope climbs while poor Zach,
as tall as he is, man, it was ripping him up for sure. But I mean, he still performed very well. They're both just like physical specimens as well too, between like E can yoke a 200-pound bag. Like better than most guys right now. So it's impressive to see them compete.
So the thing with E that always blows me away is how balanced her strength is, because she does have crazy top end strength. She's also got cardiovascular endurance. So Zach, that's a little bit of where he lacks, right? Like he has crazy top end strength, but that cardiovascular endurance isn't like Jared's a very balanced athlete when it comes to that, right? Like he's got great cardiovascular endurance, he's got great strength. That's, I think, why you see when it comes to like the national competitions, you'll see Zach start to fall down on the leaderboard. But if we had 5 heavy stages, he would be in the very top of that leaderboard, because there's very few people that can mess with the heavy end of the weights like he can. Again, these are great point spreads. To me, this really shows that like the programming had balance to it, which is something that we always strive for, right? We want to make sure that regardless of who's out there, regardless of the composure of the team, regardless of what's happening, people are going out there and they're testing themselves, and that we're seeing different names pop up on there. I will say that it is hard to outshoot Sal. He's one of the best shots in our sport, and Lupe is quickly becoming, if not already, the best female shooter in our sport. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, especially in contrast to last year in Nevada versus this year, she's made immense strides. And she was a great shooter last year as well too, but you can tell she's been getting a lot of practice behind the trigger in the last year.
And I think that's a lot of like going out and shooting other shooting sports and getting development there. And we see that for sure. So, all right, well, that wraps up our elite team division. And our first podcast discussing performance, our first performance podcast. What'd you think?
I think it's helpful. I liked it a lot.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's super important for us to dive into the particulars of the sport.
Yep.
You know, as it's growing rapidly, people see all the cool stuff and all the badass stuff that we post, and then you see new competitors come out and they're like, oh, I finished first on the stage, and then they go to practice score and they come to this the next day and they're like, I did so well on the stage, but I'm at 7th or 8th place now. Why is that? So I think this podcast is going to be really good in demystifying, you know, like the weirdness that is practice work, because it is kind of a pain in the ass to navigate. But once you understand it, it's super beneficial for you as a competitor, because then you know how to put together a better strategy to, you know, continue your progress in the sport.
Absolutely. So one thing, let's touch on this real quick. We'll go back to the practice score page. So one thing that I look at pretty often, I used to go back to my historical scores and look at this all the time too. So not only like, and we're in the tactical division now, so we're looking at time and penalties. It doesn't appear, and this is typical when somebody finishes by 10%, that anybody outperformed Austin physically, and they shot better than everybody. So you're going to have a big percentage on a win. The Gross brothers are out there. They performed awesome. It's always awesome to see those guys. Now let's scroll down to the bottom here. We've got William Anderson, which is highlighted by my cursor here. William Anderson, his times would have, had he shot consistently, put him possibly in the top 5 as far as times go. But when we scroll down to that penalty, where is that name at?
Yeah, you're looking at 204 misses total. Well, 2,040 penalties throughout the entire weekend.
So 204 misses.
Yep.
I mean, that's a significant amount of misses.
Yeah, that's
and that doesn't capture all the
95.
stages. Remember, that's the point stages aren't accounted for in those penalties there either.
True.
So you're talking about a ton. It looks like some failure to engages, some rifle misses, definitely a lot of penalties that occurred on the longer stages. But yeah, just always an interesting, it looks like they finished everything physically, but they had some significant penalties when it came to shooting. So something always to pay attention to is like how your team's performing and how you guys are doing, not only physically, but also on the shooting side of stuff.
And you touched on it a minute ago, but talking about shooting other sports, especially stuff like USPSA, 2-gun, PRS, whatever it is.
PCSL.
Yeah, exactly. It's always good to do that stuff because it helps you out with your weapons manipulation, and you see it on the action stages where you can see swings like that. So being able to just do different sports to just kind of meld all that together.
And that's why we put such an emphasis on the shooting at skirmish. Skirmish has 2 physical stages and 2 shooting only stages. And those shooting only stages are an excellent opportunity to work on this.
Yep, absolutely.
Cool. All right. Well, until next time, guys, thank you all for tuning in, and we'll see you soon.
See you.